Hello, welcome to Paper Mache Mask video 1. Today I'm going to be showing you guys how to not only prep but start and make and completely make your paper mache mask all the way up until the point in which it needs to dry and you can paint it. So for the record, we are making 2 masks for this project. Your requirement is everyone's making 2 masks, and on at least one of the masks, one of the features are going to be built up or exaggerated. I'm also going to be showing you how to do that in this video today. So first and foremost, once your packet and your ideas have been approved, you guys are going to receive some newspaper. When you get your newspaper, your job is to cut this into about 1-inch strips in order to do paper mache. So I'm cutting them into long strips, but these strips are too long to do paper mache. So what I'm gonna do is fold it in half, and these are perfect. So I have about 1-inch strips, maybe 3 to 4 inches long, and I have a bunch of them pre-cut. So once you have all your newspaper cut, students, you will also be receiving a Ziploc bag, so you have space to store your newspapers so they're not just floating around your backpack. So once you have all your newspaper pre-cut, y'all are gonna receive your masks. I'm going to ask you guys, when you get your mask, since we're making 2, get a piece of tape, and we're gonna put one inside, and then we're gonna put your name in it. So therefore, we don't get them lost, we don't get them confused, because as we start to make these, they're all gonna look alike. So I'm gonna put example. All right, so now I have my example inside, all right? So, I have my newspaper, I have my mask. First thing you're gonna do is, we are gonna use a little bit of petroleum jelly or Vaseline to coat our mask. The reason we wanna put down the petroleum jelly is because when we do the paper mache against the face template, if we do not have something in between our newspaper and the glue or adhesive that we're using, we basically just glued our mask to the template and we won't be able to pop it off. So by putting a little layer of Vaseline, we're giving it some oil, and so therefore it'll just slide right off when it's dry. So make sure you put a thin layer, very thin. You don't need a lot of it. When you put a lot, that oil seeps into your newspaper, so it's just kind of a good thin coat. Make sure you get everything, make sure nothing sticks, nothing will rip. Okay. Mine feels pretty good. Okay. So, I've put my petroleum jelly on my whole mask, right? Here's my template, okay? And I have my newspaper strips cut. So, the paper mache process, we are going to be using starch. It is not dangerous, great for crafts, it says right on there. I always like to tell students though, if you do not have starch or access to starch, instead of going out and spending your money, if you need a home remedy, when you mix half baking flour as well as half water, it becomes a thick paste. When that dries, it dries like concrete. So if you need a home remedy in order to do this without having to go buy anything, half flour, half water, mix it till it's a paste, and it'll work just as well. I've actually used it as a teacher on years I did not have starch. So, I have my little cup of starch and I have my newspaper strips. This process is fairly easy. So I take a newspaper strip, okay? I'm gonna dip it in the starch, wipe off the excess, and I'm gonna lay it down against my mask. And I'm starting, as you can see, at the forehead. And then I'm wiping. So this process, get my newspaper, dip it, okay, wipe off the excess, place it, and massage. So a couple things here as I continue this process. You're gonna notice when I lay my newspaper down against my mask, I'm overlapping the layer before it. The reason is if I leave a gap structurally, my mask is gonna lack integrity when it dries. So therefore, by overlapping it, I'm ensuring that it's gonna be strong and secure and safe and prevent it from having an easy way to damage or ruin. Another thing you're gonna notice is I am going left to right, ear to ear right now. on this mask. The reason I'm doing it and keeping it consistent is because when you do paper mache, you're gonna build up multiple layers of the mache process. So, I like to keep changing my direction. I would highly recommend you keep changing your direction as you change how many layers you've put down onto your mask. And the reason I recommend that is because when you change the direction, you're creating a lock and you're guaranteeing that structurally your mask will be fine. When we keep them lined up together, sometimes we can line them up so well that when the mask is done and dry, you just created long strips and the mask doesn't hold together. So I would advise minimum 4 layers of the paper mache process, and I would also advise changing your direction every time. So if one's vertical, then the other one's gonna be horizontal. Vertical, horizontal. Change your direction. I don't care if you wanna throw in some diagonals in there, as long as you're changing your direction. So this process, dip, wipe, place, and then massage. If I do not massage, I'm gonna have a bunch of air bubbles in my mask and underneath it, and I really don't want the air bubbles. I have a really nice face template here, and I'd like those features to be exaggerated, especially since I'm building up some layers. So by massaging that air out, I know I'm really exaggerating, you know, the eye sockets, the nose, the nostrils, and I'll get that detail when my mask dries. So dip, wipe, place, and massage. All right. Dip, wipe, place, and massage. Okay. So I'm gonna finish up this first layer and then I'll be back to start layer 2. All right, so I have just completed my first layer of paper mache. As you can see, it's pretty wet, it's dripping, and yeah. So now, as you notice, hopefully, my newspaper is going from ear to ear. Now I'm gonna start a vertical direction of laying my mache down. And the reason I'm changing it again is to create a better lock, so when this dries, my mask has structural integrity. So now I'm going up and down. Remember, you also want to massage it through. You don't want any gaps or air bubbles. So I'm dipping, I'm wiping, I'm placing, and I'm massaging. Also remember, as you lay this down, I'm overlapping my pieces of cardboard. You don't want gaps at all. It's almost like the more the merrier pertaining to paper mache. So don't be afraid, or, oh, I put a 5th layer. That's fine, your mask will be strong and reliable. Even if you want to cut your mask down after pertaining to, or relating to if you want to cut the eyes out, or you want to cut it down to make a masquerade mask, you absolutely can. I know I'm telling you, like, we want this mask strong, we want it reliable. However, it is just 4 or 5 layers of newspaper. So if you wanted to cut something to exaggerate a specific feature or to highlight something, you absolutely can. Just use an X-Acto knife. It will work. It will work well. Okay. So I'm going to finish up layer 2. I'm also going to do layer 3 and 4, and then we'll be back to learn how to make the clay to exaggerate some features on our mask. All right, so I have about 4 to 5 layers of my paper mache built up on my mask template. So option 1 is now I could go let this dry, or option 2 is if I want to exaggerate a specific feature, now would be my opportunity to build and add that clay on. So here's a mask example, the V for Vendetta mask, where we have features that are exaggerated and built on, such as these high eyebrows. Now on my template, our eyebrows are naturally much lower, but also I have this mustache that's been built on and added on, as well as these lips. So when I bring it close, hopefully you could see that these eyebrows are actually raised and extended off of the mask. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna show you how we can exaggerate those features before our mask dries and it can dry all together as one. Here's one more pretty good example about the clay that we're talking about. So if you want to build up features such as a larger nose, this person built up with the clay, they extended the nose to exaggerate the panda, but they also filled in the eye sockets because pandas have more of a flat face. So hopefully you get to see that and you can see how that works. If you want to extend something off your project, such as ears, a crown, you're making a fox snout, or you're making a sun with a bunch of rays, what we use is cardboard from like a cereal box, because it's still like somewhat loose, and we just tape it onto the mask and we do a layer of mache over it, which gives it more structural integrity, so it's not going to fall off, break off, snap off, or anything like that. So now that I've shown you 2 examples and I've already communicated that we're going to be building the clay, what you're going to do is you're going to get a couple pieces of toilet paper. So my goal is I'm going to exaggerate some high cheekbones for my project. If you want to make, eyebrows because you're trying to exaggerate and accent makeup, that's fine. It could be any feature you want, but for the example's sake, I'm gonna make more balled up cheeks. So I have my toilet paper, and what I'm gonna do is I'm going to be ripping up this toilet paper into tiny, tiny pieces. All right, so I'm ripping it up as much as I can. And I only have about 3 to 4 squares here. You really don't need a lot. So, ripping it up. Okay. Okay. So, I'm ripping this up. And now I have a handful of compressed, ripped up toilet paper. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my starch that I'm working with and my dried up, ripped up toilet paper, and I'm gonna dip it in this starch. Okay. Now that I have some starch into it, I'm gonna pull it apart and start pushing this together. Basically what I'm doing by getting it wet is it's breaking down the fibers of the toilet paper, but it can't really break down into nothing, so it kind of turns into a molding clay. But since I'm using a type of adhesive with it, it will stick. That being said, if you are at home and you are using the flour water mixture, this works the same exact way. Same way. So I'm pulling it apart, pushing it back together. Just kind of massaging the starch in between each of those ripped up pieces of toilet paper. Okay. So that's my goal. I might need more for my second cheek, but we'll see. Okay. So I'm just massaging it, kind of making it like a molding clay or a paste at this point. So, okay. So I'm gonna squeeze it. And now you're gonna see that I have kind of like a molding clay. It's not gonna go anywhere, it's not gonna fall off, it's gonna stay right where it is. However, the best part is I get to move and manipulate this in any way that I want. As well as if I add too much to my project, it's easy to remove it because a small amount because I ripped it up into tiny pieces. Or if I need to add more, it's already sticky and ready. I can make a new batch and add more to my project. So here's my nose, well, my mask nose. My face is facing you. I like to personally work backwards. So here's my nose, here are my eyeballs, right? The lips on the project. I'm gonna be extending this cheek on that side first. So I'm dipping it in starch because I wanna make sure that this sticks to my project, right? And I'm starting to just place it, right, on my project. I'll try to do it your direction. There we go. And I'm just molding and massaging it exactly where I want it. So if I were to paint like a sunshine smiling, I'd have a high cheek here. That's too big. Okay. So like you just saw, I was able to easily rip some off and just put it off to the side. I could use that for my other cheek. So I'm massaging. And I don't want a really obnoxious, exaggerated features, so what I'm gonna be doing is kind of blending this out to look like it's part of the cheek just being rised off the face. So I'm blending, okay. Blending up into the cheekbone here. Okay, not bad. And I just want to make sure it's a smooth transition into the face, because the face is pretty smooth. There's not really any sharp lines if you're going realistic. Of course, if you're doing like an army mask or something, it's gonna have sharper lines, so don't be afraid to make sharper lines. Depends on what you're making. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with it. It's not bad. I have my cheek blended out. All right. And what I mean by blended out is it's now like gets thinner and thinner, and it creates like a wedge, and it becomes flush with my newspaper. So now I'm gonna work on the other side. Hopefully I can match it. I think I'm gonna need a little bit more. So I got my newspaper, I'm ripping it up, tiny pieces, dipping in the starch, and then I'm massaging it together, pulling it apart, pushing it back together, making sure I get starch in between every piece of this. Okay. I didn't do a good job. You can tell if you did a good job massaging it, because it turns really loose and it feels very thin. Whereas if you don't, it just feels like compacted wet toilet paper. Shocking. Okay. Sometimes I like to get my fingers in the starch so I could easily blend it out so it doesn't stick to my hands. Okay, where's my eyeball? A little bit under. Okay, it's a little too much there. Pretty good. How thick is it? A little thicker. Let's add that there. Awesome. Blend it out. Nice high cheekbone. Those are not even. I need to lower this. Okay, much better. A little better. Okay. So now I have two somewhat even, pretty big balled up cheekbones. They end up blending out with the face. So the only thing about this is I can go let it dry. It's absolutely fine. If you don't mind the different texture between the newspaper and the toilet paper, you can absolutely let it dry. Once it's dry, you pop it off and go paint. Personally, I like to keep it consistent. So before I let it go dry, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some of that newspaper and I'm going to just cover up these cheekbones. However, when you massage and compress, you need to be very careful, because as you saw, I just laid the molding clay, so it's wet. Therefore, if I compress it too hard, I'm gonna move and manipulate it and lose the shape that I worked so hard on. So I'm just putting a couple more layers over it. I'm massaging it, but again, I'm being very, very gentle and careful with it, because I don't want to ruin it. One. sticky. Okay. Aesthetically, I just like to make it even, so I'm doing a layer of mache. However, this is not required, but know that when it dries, that toilet paper will have a different textural element. Here's the example. So normal flat newspaper, textural difference between just letting the clay dry and painting it over. If you want it to be smooth and consistent, do a layer of mache over it. All right, should be just about done. Okay, nice cheekbones, man. So I'm going to show you one more time. Hopefully you could see it. I know it's hard to tell depth in a video, but I have 1 and 2 very, very exaggerated cheekbones. Start from one side and give you a slow rotation. Hopefully you could see it. Hopefully you could see it. All right. So now I'm done. All I have to do is let this go dry. Once it's dry, it'll slide off because I put that layer of Vaseline down, and I'm free to work, clean my workstation. So hope that helps, and we'll be back for video 2 to show you how to slide it off and you can start painting your work.